Hi, I'm Mike Sullivan. Welcome to Guitar Tech, how to do it yourself. Hi, Gospel Guitarist here. I had an inquiry about intonation the other day, and I thought, yeah, that'd make a great video, along with all the other ones out there. But the question was on how to intonate a typical adjustable bridge. So let's get this guy on the workbench and take a closer look at the procedure. Okay, now the tools that you're going to need to do this are simple. You're going to want a typical pick that you use. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver. I use these little ones because you have to get in here next to the strings, and there's just not a whole lot of room for a big screwdriver. So if you have these little screwdrivers, they work really great for this. And you're also going to need a trusty tuner. What I have here is a really old Savin ST1100. This thing's going on about 20 years old. It's Mr. Dependable. Been kicked, dropped, run over, whatever, and it still goes. And I like it. Takes a little bit for it to settle in, but I trust its readings. When it comes to intonation, if you got a rack tuner, like a Korg rack tuner, that's really recommended. The rack tuners are really high quality. If they're a Korg or something like a Savin or something, Sabin, however you pronounce these words, you know. Somebody's surely going to correct me. So, the procedures here that we're going to do for the intonation, though. Couple things you want to have done first is you want to have fresh strings. Okay, you don't want old strings that are all worn out. You want some fairly new strings that are at least a day old or so, and you want to make sure that they're nice and stretched out. And when I stretch my strings, I usually kind of grab it like this and do this action between my thumb and my index and middle finger. I just kind of stretch it and I run up and down the string doing that, and then I keep retuning until it doesn't move very much anymore. Usually you get worn out doing that over 6 strings. So, but you want them stretched out so that they're pretty settled in, so you won't have to keep adjusting your intonation, you know, over the next 2 weeks. You want your strings fairly settled to work with. You want to make sure everything else about your guitar is set up the way you like it. You want to make sure your neck relief is set properly. Make sure you have the string height over your fretboard, which is the action. Make sure you have that set up properly. Make sure your nut height is correct. Usually that's not an issue. But on some nuts, you know, they're bad. So you want to make sure all the other little things are adjusted properly, and intonation is basically the last step in a guitar setup. So once everything else is completed, okay, then you want to attack your intonation. Now, for many years, I always just figured to use harmonics at the 12th fret, but in my studies recently in a new book, they are really stressing to not use harmonics because they're not as accurate. And when you think about it, that makes sense because you don't always play harmonics, you play notes. Harmonics are used for color and things, and little tricks and whatnot to liven up your solos and things, but you don't normally play harmonics. You play full-blown notes and you finger them. So it only makes sense to set your intonation to that type of scenario. So the procedure is really actually simple, but the actual working through it can drive you crazy, because there's little things that can affect your intonation. I play a lot with the Tortex picks. I use a lot of the Dunlop Tortex picks, and their attack on the string is different than, say, a stubby or a jazz pick or something that's really firm. So the attacks are going to be different, which is going to spike the note differently, and that's going to affect how I tune the string. So depending on how you want to tune your string, based on your playing style, you're going to want to keep all that in consideration. So typically you would do this while holding the guitar in your lap, you know, normal playing position, not tuning it on the table. You would never tune your guitar on your table. I mean, when was the last time you tuned your guitar on your table? You usually have it in your hand, right? Well, intonation is not any different. I have it on the table here because it's just a lot easier to show you in the camera angles and things, but I also use both. I go onto the table and then I pick it up because trying to balance it on my lap in a normal playing position while using a screwdriver on a nice paint job to me screams hazard. So I don't do that. Some people do. That's great, and that's the way you should do it. But for me personally, it just makes me nervous not having complete and utter control over just the screwdriver. So anyway, on with the lesson. What we do is you want to tune your guitar, okay? Normal tuning, make sure everything's cool. So since I don't play with my fingers all the time, I'm always playing with a pick, so I'm going to pick it with a pick. As you can see, I'm sharp, so I can tune it until I'm not sharp anymore. And you always want to go below the tuned note and tune up to it. Go below it and then tune up to the note. Because you want to keep tension on the string as you're tuning it. If you loosen it down to a note, then you've loosened the whole chain, and it's the second you start playing, it's just going to go lower, and then your guitar is going to be flat. So once you get the string tuned to E, see it takes a second there to settle on this tuner, then what you do is you would finger the note at the 12th fret and play it again. And you can see it has settled down to an E. But if you noticed on the attack, it went sharp and then it goes down. Now I could tune it to where the sharp actually attacks on the E, but I don't do that. I always wait and I tune it to the settled tone, not the actual sharp attack. Because I play soft sometimes and sometimes I play hard. Now if I play death metal where I was just banging the thing constantly all the time, I would tune it to the sharp note instead. And a lot of metal guys do that. I play all kinds of stuff, so I don't tune it to the sharp note. So if this note would have been flat, then what you would do is you would take your screwdriver, and in this case I'm not going to do anything because you just seen that it was correct, so why would I change that? But if I turn the guitar here, on your bridge you've got flathead screws for each saddle that the string is on. So if this string was flat, then what I would do is I would turn the screw so that the saddle would move forward. So the only way that I have found that really will work to remember these little rules, because I've always forgotten which way it goes to make it sharp, flat, which way do I move the saddle, and I'm always looking that up all the time. And so I've come up with this saying, flat forward, and that's it, just flat forward. And then the other one is obvious, right? So if it's sharp, you move it backwards, okay? So you would turn the screw counterclockwise, or loosening the screw, right, will push the saddle forward, and that will shorten your scale length of the string so that you need more tension to make it the proper note. If the string is sharp, then you would turn it clockwise, or a tightening of the screw, and that'll move the saddle towards the back of the guitar. I would say towards the bridge, but it is the bridge, so that ain't going to work, is it? And it's simple. That's basically the whole procedure. You ring the note open, you finger it at the 12th fret. You can play a harmonic at the 12th fret, but it's just not going to be as accurate. Finger it at the 12th fret, and the two notes need to be the same. They're exactly one octave apart. You have a low E, fingering it at the 12th fret, you have the E a next octave up. Okay? And I'm pulling on these and putting weight on that. That's why you want it in your hand, because as you can see, it kept going sharp. And that's just the weight of my finger on the fretboard doing stuff like that. So when you go to intonate the guitar, you just do one string at a time. Make sure that the open note and the fingered 12th note octave is identical on your tuner. Okay, that's all there is to it, and then you just slide the saddle back and forth. Now, usually what I do is I go string by string, and I'll say, well, it's flat, and then I'll adjust it, and then I will pick it up and check it in my hands in the playing position and verify that I made the proper correction. and then I'll go back to the table again and move on to the next string, and so on and so forth. But that's really all there is to intonation. These two screws on your bridge adjust the overall action string height from like the 12th fret, the high end of the fretboard. That's what this affects, okay? Your nut affects the low end of your fretboard, but your bridge height affects how you play over the fretboard on the high end registers. But these two screws do not have anything to do with intonation, just string height. Over the, overall, the whole bridge will go up and down. But the intonation is only the screws on the side, and that's all there is to intonation. One thing I would mention, though, is intonation is usually set at the factory for most guitars you'll buy in the store. And you might want to find out what the gauge are that are on the guitar when you buy it. Like this guitar came with 9s installed on it, set up wonderfully, plays beautifully. I haven't actually adjusted the intonation, and this is a 2006, and it has not been touched since it left the factory, and it's been great. I have 9.5s on it. I have gone up to 10s. Generally, if you go from a 9 to a 10 gauge string, you're going to want to adjust your intonation, but little moves like a 9 to a 9.5 string gauge, small gauge changes, you shouldn't really have a real big noticeable difference. But for anything more than 2 points, I would say to go ahead and check your intonation, because you're probably going to have to adjust something somewhere. And that's about it for intonation. Make sure you're doing it in this position, and like I have the table here and my tuner and everything, and I can just go back and forth, and it's just doing this maneuver here makes me nervous. And that's all. That's the only reason I just do it on the table, and then I pick it up. So I'm actually doing the check in this position. I do the adjustments on the table, but I make sure I'm checking it in the playing position, because this is where it matters. So make sure you're doing that. Don't just, I used to always do it on the table, and I'd spend all day trying to get my intonation right. But it's going to be in the playing position. All the little things are going to affect your intonation. If you're holding your hand up here while you're tuning, it's going to affect the tuning of the string. Even doing tuning, I very lightly touch the neck. I don't want any of my hand weight on the guitar at all when you're setting it up and tuning it. You just want to make sure that the guitar's own weight and gravity and your strings are all settled in, so that you can get that intonation right, and then you're good to go. Play with your guitar, figure out which gauge you really like it on. I like the 9.5s on this, I like 10s on this, but I think the 9.5s are better for what I do with this guitar. And so that's it. Once I intonate it, it's set up for 9.5, the Diarios. That's what I play on. My other guitar is my Schecter C1EA is set up with 10s on it, and I set the intonation to 10s because I don't like 9s on it. They're too thin for the piezo, So each guitar is going to have its quirks. Settle in on a certain size string, and then set your intonation, and it should never change. Humidity factors and things like that will affect your neck and relief going in and out depending on where you live and things like that, but it's not going to affect your intonation at all. It's just going to affect your neck relief. And adjusting your neck does not mean you have to adjust your intonation. Okay, string gauge, if you change your nut, you may have to check it, make sure it's still on, because something about the nut, the depth of the nut and whatnot, and height of the nut can affect your intonation. So if you do any changes at this end of the guitar, you're going to have to make changes at this end. So that's about it. It's just really, you need patience. That's the big deal. Patience. Try to use the same pick attack when you're on every time that you do the open, and when you're fingering at the 12th fret, try to pick it with the same amount of force so that you're actually playing the two notes the same. Okay, if you keep playing them different, it's going to drive you nuts trying to get that intonation set. So you really have to pay a whole lot of attention to your own picking when you're setting up your intonation. So that affects it. So I hope that helps. I should have done this video a long time ago, and this video has rambled on. So I will end it now. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps you set up your intonation. Guitars play so much better when the intonation is set correctly on them. They play good at the whole guitar neck will play good and stay in tune much better with a good intonation. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe to my channel. And if you have ideas on intonation bridges and different types of bridges, they're same procedure. If you have a Fender Strat, I gotta throw this in real fast. If you have a different type of bridge, this procedure applies to no matter what kind of bridge you have. Okay, you can have a Fender Stratocaster, a Telecaster, whatever, a bass, whatever. All of them have adjustable, electrics have adjustable bridges on them, and it's the same exact procedure. So the bridges and the screws might look a little different, but same exact thing. Well, thanks for watching, and see you next time on Guitar Tech, how to do it yourself.